The Gothic horror genre is one that is defined by its association with internal fears and darkness, both on an individual level such as the fears and horrors one may experience internally in everyday life, and at a slightly larger but still small-scale level such as a haunted house. The genre was first explored in the 18th century but became much more developed throughout the 19th century by various authors such as Mary Shelley and Edgar Allan Poe, the latter of which would come to be almost synonymous with the genre as well as 19th century American literature as a whole. Edgar Allan Poe was born on January 19, 1809 and died on October 7, 1849. One of the earliest and most influential American authors, Poe is remembered for a lot of different things outside of his writing, like giving most women in his life tuberculosis, and also dropping some fire against Stephen King in that rap battle.
Even you pretend to do it, I've been really living through it, misery and poverty and family woes.
But one of the most important things that stands out about Poe amongst his early American contemporaries is that he was one of the first American authors to make his living entirely as a writer. Unlike many other early American writers like Washington Irving and Ralph Waldo Emerson, among others, who were various other careers for a while, whether it be minister or lawyer or something to that effect, and transitioned into writing in somewhat of a pastime as they got older. Poe was one of the first American authors to have the majority of his life spent as a full-time author. This is a very long-winded way of saying that for most of his life, Edgar Allan Poe was extremely poor.
You're broke! You're fucking poor!
Although Poe spent the majority of his career as a full-time writer, as anyone who went to a high school in America can tell you, he was one of those authors that unfortunately only started to receive any sort of fame and recognition after his death. And despite being recognized today as a titan of American literature, most of Poe's work while he was alive consisted of nonfiction and critical pieces, with a few short stories thrown in here and there. Throughout his unfortunately short life, Poe wrote dozens and dozens of stories and poems and even a novel. Unfortunately, he also left behind many unfinished works after he died in 1849 of something, I guess. We don't really know what he died from. In the over century and a half since his death, there have been uncountable works that have been inspired by the words of Poe or adapted directly from them. But when it comes to these direct adaptations, there's a little bit of an elephant in the room, isn't there? Most of Poe's work is poems or short stories. Things that are, for the most part, kinda short.
Correct!
Short and sweet, let's call it. Teeny tiny if you think about it. Most of them usually fall in between like 10 and 15 pages long. Something that's short, especially something that focuses a lot on internal discussion, narration, and scene descriptors like Poe usually would do, can be very difficult to adapt into a full feature film, or even like a TV episode, really anything that's not just a specific dedicated short film. This is why the majority of things that are adaptations of Poe's work tend to be very, very loose adaptations. Often, instead of a direct adaptation of like The Pit and the Pendulum or The Raven, you'll have a weird sort of modern narrative about someone obsessed with the old Poe stories and recreating them in like a crazed serial killer fashion. Or you might have a bunch of his other stories fit together in one larger thing, sort of like putting 8 stories together in a trench coat to make one movie. Or even an action movie where Poe himself has to hunt down this crazed serial killer that is inspired by several of his stories in a trench coat. Shout out John Cusack for that one, you were great in School of Rock. Now, to be clear, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? It's more so just what you have to put up with when you're trying to take one of these works across a medium. It's the cost of doing business, if you will. Just as you have to alter some things inevitably if you want to make a modern Shakespeare adaptation.
Put up your swords!
If you want to bring Poe into the modern day with modern trends in terms of TV or movies or really anything, you're going to have to put your thumb on the scale a little bit. And one of the more recent examples of this that I wanted to talk about today, because I think it does it really, really well and is just kind of an interesting thing to look at, is Mike Flanagan's Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher.
It's time.
For my money, Mike Flanagan is one of the best modern horror directors around. While it is certainly true that he is known to enjoy a monologue a little from time to time.
What do you love more, Kate Siegel or monologues? Kate Siegel.
Aw, thanks, honey. You're gonna do it, aren't you?
I remember when I first met Kate. They say you never see those moments come.
Over the last 10 years, he has consistently put out some of the better parts of the horror genre across both TV and film, as well as adaptations and original works, with stuff that kind of fits all over the place, like Midnight Mass, The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor, Gerald's Game, even the Dr. Sleep movie I think he did. So if nothing else, Mike Flanagan has certainly cut his teeth in the past 10 years. Flanagan is also somewhat of a Tarantino-esque director. Not in the sense that he has an appreciation for bare feet, but rather in the fact that he tends to use a lot of the same actors throughout multiple projects. Except for Hamish Linklater, I guess, even though he was definitely the best part of Midnight Mass, but fuck him, I guess, and by extension, fuck me. I want more Hamish Linklater. What the fuck? And in 2023, Mike Flanagan released his tale on Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Fall of the House of Usher, in the form of an 8-episode Netflix miniseries. And just a quick pause before we get into the meat and potatoes here, this is gonna be kind of a full spoiler deal. So if you have even just a passing interest in any of Mike Flanagan's work, or Edgar Allan Poe's work for that matter, I highly recommend that you check this out. It's a very fun show with a lot of very good horror elements and moments, as well as just a really, really good kind of narrative through line. But if you have seen it, or you simply just don't care, for my little warning there, and you say, whatever, I'm just gonna listen to this video anyway, I probably won't even look at it, I just need to be distracted from the goings on of my everyday life and just have something to drown out the voice in my head. Bleh. Let's go, I guess. The show tells the story of the rise and the, well, fall of the Ushers, a powerful American pharmaceutical family that is essentially responsible for the entire opioid epidemic. For the most part, the narrative is told in retrospect in the form of a confession being given by the patriarch, Roderick Usher, to his longtime rival and state's attorney, Auguste Dupont, who's been trying to shut down their pharmaceutical empire for decades. In this confession, Roderick explains to Auguste the story of his rise and fall and the recent demise of his 6 children, all while essentially being haunted by the visions of his dead family members and a mysterious figure named Verna, who is essentially a Lady Death, a Santa Muerte figure. Now, hearing this, if you're unfamiliar with Poe's work, you may think, wow, this must be a direct adaptation, right? This is incredible. Poe has such foresight. How could he have imagined something as horrific and terrifying as corporate power and the pursuit of capital driving millions of Americans to opioid addiction? And shocker, no. That's not really what Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Fall of the House of Usher, is about. The short story in question features no pharma giants, no overreaches of corporate power, no back and forths with a lifelong rival, no heirs to the House of Usher, let alone their untimely demises. The short story of The Fall of the House of Usher is roughly 15 pages long and is about an unnamed narrator visiting his friend, Roderick Usher, who has grown sickly and melancholic, if you will, after many years apart, and basically just hanging out with him until his twin sister and him die in a very weird manner, and then the house collapses, and the narrator just says, "That was weird," and leaves. Gross oversimplification of a defining gothic horror story and terrifying thematic implications about the nature of isolation and despair aside, my point is that the framing here is right off the bat extremely loose. Even just at the start of the series, we are already taking a huge departure from what we would expect of a direct adaptation. And from here on out, the narrative turns into a classic case of the aforementioned 8 short stories in a trench coat. Or more like 9 or 10 short stories and like a couple poems and stuff, and a novel. Look, it's a big trench coat, okay? My point is, most of the episodes of the series are named after and framed around a different classic Poe short story, like Murder in the Rue Morgue, or The Telltale Heart, Mask of the Red Death, etc., etc. And each of these episodes serves as somewhat of a mini anthology series, with each one being a indirect adaptation of the short story that basically will tie into the demise of one of the Usher family. And a lot of Poe's other lesser known stuff is tied in as well, almost as like MCU Easter egg level shit. Like the Pym Reaper, the family's lawyer who's named after the main character of Poe's only ever novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. And I said there that they're somewhat of a mini anthology, because the series is by no means a traditional anthology, like a Twilight Zone or that Guillermo del Toro show from not too long ago, where it's all sort of separate and they're not related, there's definitely narrative through lines. Even within each individual episode that is an adaptation of, say, Mask of the Red Death, there's still a lot of other time given to the various plot lines that drive the through line of the show forward for the other characters, even as Lord Prospero meets his horrific fate. He just wanted to have an orgy and then blackmail all of the participants with the footage. Did he really deserve that? I mean, yes, obviously, but I digress. And I think that the show's nature here of this quasi-anthology is more or less its greatest strength, as it allows Flanagan to combine some of the most well-known stories in all of horror with his own narrative about the broader implications of corporate power and deals with the devil and cheating death, and how all of that plays into an individual's psyche. This is great because it allows Flanagan to take these stories and use them as somewhat of building blocks and extrapolate a lot of their interpersonal meanings to wider societal implications, something that Poe really didn't do that much. This pairing of Edgar Allan Poe and Mike Flanagan is somewhat, to me, a match made in heaven. For two reasons, really. The first one is that Mike Flanagan is definitely someone who has the ability to understand the underlying themes here in Poe's work, and then also the ability to translate that into film, as well as taking them to the next level and incorporating them in his wider narrative. And two, I think that they often receive some of the same complaints. See, one of the complaints that was levied against Poe was that his work and his writing could come off as too, well, poetic.
Oh, brother!
Aldous Huxley once claimed that his extreme poeticness was akin to wearing a diamond ring on each finger. That is to say, unnatural, hoity-toity, it's just trying too hard to impress, ingenuine at times. And Mike Flanagan is often known to write in ways that are very, let's say, wordy, embellished even. To put it simply, people in real life do not usually speak like Mike Flanagan characters do. I don't know about you, but me and my friends very rarely just monologue back and forth. But that's okay. That's how Flanagan chooses to write his characters. It's an intentional thing he does. It's not that he just can't stop himself, like he sits down to write a quick back and forth and then, oh no, Riley's going on for 2 pages, shit. Just as Shakespeare probably wrote more monologues than he ever just heard candidly, I think that Flanagan is writing for dramatic effect here. He's hamming it up, if you will. And I think that pairs very well with a lot of Edgar Allan Poe's writing style. Not binding themselves to trying to recreate the original stories one-to-one gives Flanagan and his cast a whole lot of room to work with, and it allows them to weave in the larger plot lines and structure in a way that doesn't really feel forced or unnatural. And it also allows them to make a lot of changes to the stories themselves that, for the most part, I think are pretty fun. It's kind of like where you read something when you're way younger, be it in high school, and you haven't really thought about it much since then. You know you read The Telltale Heart, but you don't really remember the details of it other than, a heart in the floorboards and the guy going like, oh my god, I can hear it, or what have you, right? So when we get to the Telltale Heart episode, you can kind of imagine where it's going. You can think, okay, someone's getting chopped up and put in the floor. But with that foreknowledge comes expectation, and Flanagan does a lot to subvert it at times, which is honestly a lot of fun. It's fun trying to anticipate where things are going and seeing how they'll relate back, how it'll tie in, and even, if you're right or wrong, it's still kind of fun, like, oh, yep, I got that one, or like, oh, yeah, no, I don't know how I didn't see that coming. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I think that that's something that I really find enjoyable when I'm watching something like this, which is taking a lot of well-known classic stories and putting a new twist on them. For instance, with the Telltale Heart episode, we see Vic, who's designing a biomedical device to go around the heart and help it beat indefinitely, offering a form of pseudo-immortality in a tough spot. Her clinical trials on monkeys have been failing, and she's facing increased scrutiny and deadlines from her father. So she's set up to basically trying to push this experiment through. She has this woman who shows up and is ready, willing, and able, for the most part, to be her test dummy. And it seems like there's a setup that, oh, okay, that she's been chopping up the failed ape cadavers and smuggling them out so she doesn't get caught with the failures.
The rumor is that she cuts them up after hours. and carries them out in pieces. There's been some jokes about her lining the inside of her Birkin bag with plastic.
And so it seems like oh, okay, we're gonna finally see that. She's gonna do it, and she's gonna take this lady home and try and bury her, and like it's gonna drive her mad. And that just is not the way the story goes. It goes in a completely different direction, having Vic sort of feel this guilt and start to hear this beating come well before she ever actually murders someone. Or at least that's how it's framed, as the episode reveals that Vic murdered her partner and used the implant on her body, forgetting the whole thing as part of a mental breakdown. The stress of all that she's been under leading her to accidental manslaughter, and then that guilt driving her to madness, flipping the script and having these stressors drive her to madness and murder rather than the madness itself driving her to the murder, which is what you'd expect from the original story. It's just a fun little subversion. And a lot of the stories are like this, but not all. Some do tend to stick closer to the original script material than others, and that uncertainty is a lot of the fun. It keeps you guessing. The commitment here is more to just making each of the episodes feel enjoyable and, dare I say, fun. It's not a commitment to just recreating all of these Edgar Allan Poe stories, nor is it a recreation to just weaving this overarching narrative that just trumps everything else. It really kind of bounces back and forth. Part of the fun is that the loyalty to the source material is, for the most part, pretty intact, even if the direct events are not portrayed. For instance, in the Black Cat episode, gamer god Napoleon Usher, played by the lovely Rahul Kohli, accidentally kills his boyfriend's cat as he spirals further into addiction, leading him to get a replacement, which subsequently drives him mad and leads him to tearing up his apartment and accidentally throwing himself off a balcony in what I must say is a very funny death.
Stop! Stop!
This differs from the story in many ways, but still features our titular black cats and focuses on the danger of substance abuse and the madness a guilty conscience can bring to that pairing, keeping it spiritually in line with the story itself, even if there is no murdered wife boarded up in the wall. Much like with what we saw in the Mask of the Red Death plot, and how it lines up with this idea that the rich can't buy their way out of everything and protect themselves from all danger just by sequestering themselves away. And on the other side, for the less direct adaptations, and to a certain extent even the less directly loyal, we have the last two episodes with Goldbug and The Pit and the Pendulum. Now, The Pit and the Pendulum is definitely one of the looser ones. I mean, the episode doesn't even feature a pit. You only got half the name. Come on, just one pendulum. And there's certainly no Inquisition here sending old Freddy to his doom. Freddy is also shown to be incredibly deserving of his fate, something our narrator in the story is never ever given, and Freddy also fucking dies. This one goes against even the hopeful through line of the story itself, as instead of even a struggle for life and survival in which our protag manages a daring getting rescued in the nick of time, Freddy accidentally paralyzes himself doing what he thinks is cocaine, and then gets bisected by a makeshift pendulum during a building demolition. Really, the only connective tissue here between the source and the episode is this pendulum. Even what it does doesn't match. But nevertheless, I don't know, it's kind of a fun, goofy moment. It's very Final Destination-esque. It's very, very Final Destination-esque. And somehow that's not even like the least direct adaptation. That honor absolutely goes to Goldbug, the episode in which Tamerlane, the Usher's resident cuck queen, tries to launch like a fitness app thing with her husband and loses her mind during her unveiling, slams her stepmom with a mic stand, and then kills herself by like doing to her own body what Doc Ock did to his wife in Spider-Man 2 somehow. It's definitely one of the more amusing ways they go out in kind of a sheer like, oh my god, that's gonna happen, isn't it? And what's the difference between this and the Poe story? Well, Poe's story, The Goldbug, is about a hunt for buried pirate treasure with a cryptogram. And like, half the story is one of the characters just explaining how they solved the cryptogram and found the treasure. And there is also a very 1800s depiction of a person of color. Yay. So, maybe that one they didn't need to... Yeah, okay, that one's fine. We don't need that one. All of this to say, it lets it be fun. Which is a weird thing to say about a horror series, I know. Particularly one that I do think has a lot of good horror elements. There's a lot of good scares. The costumes and everything with the visions that Roderick sees are like fantastic. And it's great that when we see Roderick and Augie talking in the house, that we can see usually like premonitions. We can see figures in the back that don't really move until you see them leave, or may not even ever be addressed until all of a sudden next time it cuts to Roderick and something's right in his face. These visions of his children haunting him are, well, haunting. There's a lot of great tension throughout the series, and seeing how they tie in all of these various stories in with the overarching plot is a great time, even if some of them are definitely a little silly or about as subtle as a brick to the face.
It is a new piece for my Immortality collection, and it is beautiful, and I'm going to...
And there's just so many little tie-ins beyond the larger stories, like the boss being Rufus Griswold, one of Poe's old rivals, the first episode being Once Upon a Midnight Dreary, the Pym Reaper, etc., etc. Even the inclusion of Auguste Dupin, one of Poe's basically detective characters from the Murder on the Rue Morgue, as our rival to the Ushers. Poe's work was often more concerned with interpersonal thematic exploration, the despair after losing a loved one, the horror at confronting one's own death, being driven into madness by a loose bird in your house, etc., etc. While some of his works of course did extend beyond the realm of the purely personal, such as The Mask of the Red Death, many of his works that seemingly could have taken that path didn't, such as The Pit and the Pendulum, in which our protagonist is sentenced to death by an evil inquisition, but the tale is just about his own feelings and horror at death as a whole and a concept, really. There's no thought or exploration or even a condemnation. Sure, a lot of his stuff does, but sometimes it's akin to like the old Twilight Zone episodes, where for every one that was like a worrying exploration into the human condition, like the one you watched during your McCarthyism unit, there was one that ended with the classic moral of, God damn, you see that shit? Wasn't that nuts? Anyway, I'm Rod Sterling. And as a result, many of these stories fit themselves perfectly into the overarching plot of Flanagan's work, acting as the interpersonal bricks used to construct the wider narrative wall using the mortar of whatever Flanagan wants as his connective tissue. This is the advantage of a loose adaptation like this. In addition to the individual stories themselves, which are enjoyable as their own modern twists on Poe's most famous works, Flanagan also presents us with a compelling narrative through line about corruption and how far some people are willing to go to succeed, even if it literally leaves a mountain of corpses in their wake. I think that this show is great precisely because it's not a great adaptation in the traditional sense. Had Flanagan given us a series that was 8 hours of solely the fall of the House of Usher, I don't think I would have stuck around, frankly. There's only so much melancholic old guys sitting around painting I can take. Using these old stories to tell a wholly new tale is a brilliant use of them. I think that the culmination of all these elements is, shocker, the finale. The finale ties in more Poe works than most of the other episodes do, featuring the Raven, the Cask of Amontillado, and the majority of the actual events of the fall of the House of Usher. And the way that each of these fit in is honestly both narratively satisfying and just fun. Sometimes definitely in a bit of a dumb way, right? Like we have this plot element for Madeline that's been going throughout the series, talking about this weird like immortality project. She's trying to recreate her consciousness in AI. Essentially, that's her way of trying to cheat death, get out of this bargain that her and Roderick made, right? And Lenore, the granddaughter, was the test dummy there, so they tried to have this Lenore chatbot up and running, and it's one of those things where once the reveal happens that Lenore is dead, but Roderick says it's been Lenore who's texting him this whole time, and it's like one of those things where I don't know how to describe it other than in that exact moment, I finally clocked it in terms of like oh my god, her name is Lenore. Oh, I'm so stupid. And then he goes, yeah, the chatbot's not working. It's only saying one thing. You know immediately what that one thing is, and he flips the phone around and it's like, oh, nevermore, nevermore. And it was such a dumb fucking thing, but it was so like, I was like, oh, nice. I don't know, that I feel crazy for having said all that, but I really don't know how to describe it other than that. Dumb fun that really does not make a lot of sense, because Either Lenore was such a weird child that she just said nevermore all the time across her like various social platforms, like, because it's like how does a word like that even make it into your language model? Like this teenager in 2023, I don't know if she's out here using that. I don't think it's in the lexicon. I don't think she's ever said that, actually. Like, I don't think she's out here on Twitter nevermore posting, you know? Either that or Madeline was basically just getting scammed for like 10 years by these AI guys. Real trailblazing there for where we're at today, I must say. Using Roderick's awful boss Griswold as our Cask of Amontillado victim is brilliant. It ties Griswold, the rival in Poe's real life, into the place of Fortunato, the story's victim, all while having Roderick and Madeline kill him to represent that purge of that old Fortunato company. It also features what may in fact be the first ever recorded use of Another Brick in the Wall Part 1, while they, build the wall. Look, I said it wasn't always subtle, brick meet face. Quick tangent here off of that Another Brick in the Wall use, because after Another Brick in the Wall plays, something happens that made me laugh for like 3 minutes straight, because it was just so crazy and I so unexpected, and genuinely I think it is probably the most random needle drop in the
You killed Rufus Griswold tonight, didn't you? And you're here.
I'm only gonna probably play a couple seconds of the clip there for fear of a variety of copyright stuff, but that was the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Why was that playing on New Year's Eve at this bar? Like, what? I honestly don't even know how, what the fuck? Why? Why the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald? It drove me insane. Hi there, Editing Max here, and although I do think it is still really, really funny, as I was editing and going through all of this, it kind of dawned on me that actually a song about a group of sailors who are basically destined to die and their fate has already been sealed as soon as the song starts is actually a really, really good choice to put in this scene, where two people are making a Faustian bargain with the embodiment of death, ensuring their own fortune and success while damning both themselves and their family to horrific fates. It just caught me off guard and is still very funny. I will never doubt Mike Flanagan again. I'm sorry, sir. Tangent done. I just had to share that with someone. To my friends that I talked about this show to, that was the thing that I mentioned that I didn't want to say. So if you've watched this up until this point, congrats. Now you don't have to watch the show, actually, because I gave you that mystery. The entire series up until this point has essentially served as this backdrop for Roderick to take the place of the narrator from The Raven. The loss of his family, particularly young Lenore, driving him to an insanity of a sort, effectively providing more context to the narrator that we see in the poem. The series as a whole uses works of one of the earliest Gothic horror writers who often was obsessed in his work with confronting the feelings Seeing everything come together like that in the finale is honestly a lot of fun. There's still some good horror moments throughout, but it's more of that gothic horror that basically staring down the barrel of this impending death and this fall of the House of Usher, and watching these characters confront what that means. It's a very true to form telling of what Poe would have wanted the readers to get out of a lot of his stories. Is the show a perfect slam dunk, 10 out of 10, no notes? Absolutely not. But it is a lot of fun to watch, with a lot of good tension and horror moments. Even if I would say being outright scary in the traditional sense may not be the main concern of the show. This show is very, very well made, as one would expect from Mike Flanagan, with fantastic performances throughout the entire cast, a lot of fun and very interesting cinematography, and some great costuming and prosthetic work for a lot of these ghostly visions that Roderick sees, among other things. One thing about me, love it when a character's narrative is haunted by the ghostly visions of people that they've led to their death, just kind of standing there silently and haunting them. Love it. In short, I think that Mike Flanagan's Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher is really just a testament to the advantages of basically playing loosey-goosey when it comes to an adaptation, particularly if you're adapting something that may be shorter in form or older or classic or very well known. It offers a freedom for the new creative team to basically expand on the original themes and original elements, as well as tie in a lot of new stuff to form something from that initial standpoint. And when done correctly, you can often make something that is really, really special. Something that really is just more than the sum of its parts, right? It's its whole new thing, but you can clearly identify each of the things that make up its structure. And I think that that's just something really cool, and we don't get to see it that often. So I wanted to talk about it. And I know this one was very rambly. Like, I really wanted to just get something for like a Halloween spooky. So I'm fucking hope I can make this and edit it before the next like 10 days before Halloween. But I really didn't have a script as much written out. I don't know if you could tell. I've just been kind of sitting here and speaking. I have like my notes and stuff, but I did not do my full normal script setup, and I really just had to get this done. And yeah, another quick tangent about face meeting brick here that I wanted to throw in, kind of like the Edmund Fitzgerald thing, because I just could not believe it when it happened. But in the finale, there is a scene where Mark Hamill as Arthur Gordon Pym, who is this ruthless, awful man, who is like the family's cleaner, right? He makes problems disappear. He handles all the law stuff. He literally kills people. Like in this scene, he kills this woman, and then she just shows up again because she's death, right? She's just kind of like, oh, wow, nice try. And so he clearly knows, like, uh-oh, this is the real deal. She's like death or whatever. And earlier in the series, during his investigation, he had found pictures of her with like a bunch of famous people throughout the last like few centuries, basically, or at least the last like couple hundred years, like with photographs and whatnot. So it's clearly like, you know, no, and it's like recognizable people, by the way, right? This isn't like, oh, it's just nondescript. It's like people, you know, are being implicated as making deals with death, right? And out of respect for her, and I guess, and respect for the craft or whatever, he sits down and has a conversation with her, and she kind of gives him this, basically a lore dump, you know, talking about whatever. It offers him this deal, yada, yada, yada. Stuff that really isn't important to anything.
Like I said to one of my clients, when I'm done, you can stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and it won't cost you a thing.
And Mark Hamill, who is this awful, horrible man who is directly employed by one of the most powerful corporate entities in this world, says,
Is this tab coming due anytime soon? Even I've got my limits.
motherfucker, this guy would not want Donald Trump. This guy would want Donald Trump reigning forever. This guy would want, like, this guy would be in meetings with Donald Trump monthly. Oh my God, that was insane. I had to say that. Okay.